Okay, so we've talked about why boundaries are so important for creating a healthy self-esteem as well as healthy relationships. We've talked about what healthy boundaries are and aren't. And you've had a chance to think about what are the healthy boundaries that you need in order to feel safe. So now we're going to talk about how do you set these healthy boundaries. There are three things that are required when you are going to set a healthy boundary. So the first is self-awareness. So you have to be clear of your expectations of yourself and others. You have to have awareness about your expectations. You have to know when you feel comfortable and uncomfortable in certain situations. This goes back to being aware of and honoring your emotions. Our emotions give us really good, important information, and this is one of the ways they do that. So when you're aware of your emotions, you're aware of when you feel unsafe, which lets you know, I need to set a boundary here. And you have awareness about what your values are, which is what you spent time on last week. So in order to set healthy boundaries, you have to have self-awareness. The second piece that has to happen is communication. So once you're clear on your boundary, you have to communicate it directly. As much as I wanted my husband just to know, he should have gotten it, right? I mean, come on. You listen to and you respond to what someone has to say. Except my husband hasn't spent 20 years being a therapist. My husband is not a woman who typically is more sensitive to and empathetic to what is being shared. My husband has his own anxieties and gets caught up in his head around his own stuff. So I cannot expect that he is going to read my mind and understand why I'm hurt and be able to make that correction. It's not healthy and it's not fair. It also robs me of the experience. It robs me of the experience of needing to communicate it directly, give voice to it. That is an empowering, although uncomfortable at times, experience. So communicating directly, it has to happen. Remember, as you're communicating, to be coming from a place of love. When we approach an uncomfortable conversation from a place of love versus a place of fear, it feels completely different and typically results in a very different reaction from the other person, especially if they can sense we're coming from a place of love. So here's what I was saying. You can't expect, do not assume that other people know or they should know. Keep it simple. This is why I have you practice writing it down. This can help clarify and simplify what is it that I want to say. When we're having hard conversations or uncomfortable conversations, we can be nervous, we can be anxious, and we might ramble and we might confuse ourselves or the other person we're talking to. So keep it simple. Be clear on what it is that you're asking for, why you're asking for it, what the desired outcome is. And focus on what you want, not on what you don't want. Okay, the third piece is the consequences. So you've got to share what the consequence will be if this boundary is not respected. So for instance, if I share a boundary that I will be spoken to respectfully, I want us to have a relationship where even when we're upset, we're respectful to one another. And when that doesn't happen, I am unwilling to continue that conversation. So we're communicating, here's the boundary, here's what happens if that boundary isn't respected. Now, ideally in your relationships, you're on the same page. You both want, if we're using this example, you both want a respectful relationship. And so it's easy to say, yes, of course, no, that would be really smart. Let's stop the conversation if it becomes disrespectful. But we've said what the boundary is, and then we've identified, here's what I'm going to do. So I'm focused on my behavior. I'm not focused on what the other person needs to do if they start to be disrespectful. I focus on what I'm going to do. It is so critical that when you express a boundary and you share what the consequence is going to be, you have got to follow through on that consequence. This helps you pause and consider the consequence that you're setting up. Am I really willing? Will I follow through on this consequence? Because when you don't follow through on the consequence, you've just communicated something really powerful and not good. You've communicated that you do not respect yourself. And you cannot expect that others will respect you when you are not willing to respect yourself. So consequences are critical, and holding those consequences, following through on what you say you're going to do, builds trust within yourself, but also communicates to other people, I respect and value myself, and I expect that from you as well. Okay, so what happens when someone doesn't agree with, or is even willing to listen to the boundary that you're trying to express? This can sometimes happen. So be prepared for that. Keep in mind, when you're setting a boundary, it's about creating safety in your relationships. This is not something to step into lightly. And so this is important to consider. If you are in a relationship and you have someone who isn't willing or disagrees with, consider if this is really a boundary, or is it more of a, I'd like to have this. So make sure this is really a boundary, something that you need in order to feel safe in some way. Consider why the other person may be resistant to hearing you. So brainstorm, play it out, what might be going on for them, what might be happening in the way that you're approaching the boundary. But take some time to consider what might be going on that's getting in the way of being able to communicate this. And then third, decide what kind of relationship you're going to have with this person. The reality is, what kind of relationship can you have with someone who is unwilling, uninterested to hear what it is that you need to feel safe in the relationship? It's going to be a pretty limited relationship. Doesn't mean you cut off contact, doesn't mean you have to cut them out of your life, but it would mean you're really aware of the limits of this relationship when you have someone who isn't willing to respect the boundaries. So again, setting a boundary can be an uncomfortable conversation. You need to be thoughtful about it before you step into the process. You're not looking for anyone else to agree with or give you permission to have this boundary. This boundary is based on creating safety, your values, and comes from a place of love. If all of those things are true, what you are asking for is healthy, is a good thing. And people who love and care about you will want to know and will join you in working to create the desired outcome. Okay, here's the exercise. Pick one relationship where you need to directly communicate a boundary. I know you've got one, at least one in mind. So pick one relationship where you need to communicate a boundary. Write out the boundary, specifically, word for word, write it down. Then do a little bit of check-in. What value, and maybe it's one of those 5 that you identified last week, but what value does this boundary support? Are you approaching this boundary from a place of love or fear? Is your boundary focused on your behavior or on the other person's behavior? Is your boundary simple and clear? Now, communicate that boundary. Looking forward to talking to you in our coaching call.